This is the real story behind the nun. Most people think the nun is just another fictional demon made for a jump scare, but the truth is, it's based on a real case investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. In 1952, a convent in Romania reportedly became the site of terrifying supernatural events. Nuns claimed they were being attacked by an unseen force. Doors would slam on their own. They'd hear guttural voices in the chapel at night, and one nun was even said to be possessed. When the Warrens were called in, Lorraine claimed she saw a dark spirit in the form of a nun, an entity she believed was mocking the sanctity of their faith. But what scared her the most was the overwhelming presence of something ancient, something inhuman. Lorraine later said that the name Valak came to her during a vision, and she described it as a powerful demon cloaked in pure evil. Now here's the creepy part. Valak wasn't something the screenwriters made up. It's actually a name found in old demonology texts like the Lesser Key of Solomon, where Valak is described not as a nun, but as a childlike figure riding a serpent. The filmmakers chose to give it a nun form to reflect how it targeted Lorraine's deepest fears, blasphemy and spiritual violation. So, while the movie dramatized a lot, the inspiration behind the nun comes from real stories, real fear, and a real demon that's been named in occult texts for centuries. There is also a theory that in the 70s, that a nun had apparently been buried alive in the church walls as punishment for having an affair with a monk.
This is why you should never walk alone at night again. Do you ever get the feeling that you're being followed, and maybe by something that's not even human? In 2008, a man shared his terrifying encounter online. He was walking home late at night in the city, and this should have just been like any other night, but tonight was a little different. And that's because he wasn't alone. As he walked, he noticed a man ahead of him, standing completely still. He continued on his walk, ignoring the man and ignoring this creeping sense of dread. But as he got closer, the smiling man started to follow him. The man tried to walk faster and faster, but this figure mirrored his steps, slower at first, then faster, until he was right behind him, and his smile never faded. In an absolute panic, the man turned behind him to look, and the man was only grinning wider, and then he started to run. That's when the man realized that he wasn't being followed by something, he was being hunted. So if you ever walk alone at night and you see someone standing still, just smiling, turn around, run, because that smile never fades, and neither will it. Come over here for more freaky videos.
Terrifying true stories that will give you goosebumps, Part 1. In 1885, a man received a letter from his brother in the mail. However, his brother had been dead for 13 years. The letter mentioned that his brother was mentally ill and that he'd soon be coming to visit. When the man dug up his brother's coffin, he found it completely empty.
Imagine being locked in an ice-cold swimming pool for 24 hours just to prove you can take it. That's how a notorious Brazilian cartel tests its young recruits. They drop you in, shut off the lights, and leave you there. No food, no drinking water, no way out. By the next day, chances are only one person is still alive.
On the night of November 16 of 2024, a school teacher stands outside of his class while struggling to remain calm. Only a few minutes ago, he was just inside setting up decorations for his class when he had to stop and immediately walk out after seeing something that made him jump out of his skin. Now, the school that he teaches at doesn't really have a history of paranormal occurrences, but the students there would often make up stories and rumors about the school being haunted, specifically by a student who used to go there. Whether or not this student actually existed remains a mystery, but tonight, after encountering what just happened, he no doubt believes that his class is haunted, if not the whole school. This is what he caught.
Alright, I'm just finishing up putting up decorations for the students when they get back. I was on the smartboard setting things up. I'm taking a step back, and you guys know me. I stay late often. It's just me here and the janitor. And let me show you. Do you see? Do you see? is that not a kid sitting right there?
It appears that someone is sitting at a desk towards the back of the class while facing the board in front of it. Now, just for reference, this is what it usually looks like when there isn't someone occupying a seat. Nothing stands out because clearly nothing is there, but somehow either someone or something appears. It's hard to make out any specific features, but there's definitely an outline resembling that of a child's, as viewers noted. Because of this, the instructor believes that the spirit of a former student had come to see him. However, they had come way too late to class. Now, it's worth noting that a few months ago, the school had an accident involving someone who went there. It isn't certain, but the following footage might be related.
What's happening? See, but they just put a girl in the back.
The specifics of what occurred are unknown, but according to a source, the student had unfortunately passed away only days after the accident. Ever since then, the kids at the school would come up with rumors saying that the girl's spirit haunts the building. If that's so, then this definitely makes what was captured a whole lot more interesting. But of course, I'll let you come up with your own judgment. Was a ghost caught on camera? Or might there be something that could possibly explain what was captured? As always, let me know what you think down below. Now, the following footage was recently shared by a mother who was home alone when this happened. The only other person inside the house was her baby, who had just been put to sleep in her crib. It's been a hectic night trying to calm her down as she wouldn't stop crying. According to Angela, the mother, her baby would continuously stare at an empty space before bursting into tears. It was definitely strange, but it wasn't something Angela found concerning. That is, until the following incident took place. At around 10 at night, Angela is woken up by a notification on her phone, alerting her that a person has been detected in the back patio. She immediately checks the security camera outside her house from her smartphone to see if maybe her husband was back from work. Instead, she sees this. At first, Angela thought that the figure was simply a case of pareidolia, but then suddenly, this happens. The figure, which Angela thinks looks like a little girl, slowly dissipates into thin air. Just like that, the silhouette is gone. Now, Angela has made a video showing where the little girl had appeared. While it does give some context, her video makes the footage a whole lot creepier.
Okay, so this is the area, the door that it was like standing inside. We don't have anything or keep anything in this area because it's a walkway and it would be really awkward. And then this is where the security camera is. So when I looked at the footage, I expected to see a person. I didn't expect to see that though.
It's the fact that Angela shows what it looks like if someone were to be standing at the door.
This is a true horrifying story. Part 91. This story took place in Dubai, across different timelines. It began in 1997 and it continued into the early 2000s. Multiple strange incidents happened throughout those years. Muhammad, an 18-year-old young man, lived in a small neighborhood called Sha'biyat al-Difa. This neighborhood no longer exists. The The residence eventually left. It was demolished, and in its place today stands City Walk Dubai. City Walk Dubai was built exactly where Sha'biyat al-Difa once stood. One night in the summer of 1997, around 2 or 3 a.m., Muhammad was asleep when his mother came into his room and asked, "Did you have dinner?" He replied, "Yes, Mama, I did." But before going back to sleep, he paused. Why would his mom come in at that time just to ask that? He was confused, so he rushed to her room, only to find her fast asleep in a position that made it clear she'd been sleeping for hours. The next morning, he went to his mom and asked her if she had entered his room the night before. She said no, she never woke up, and that's when he knew something was not right. About a month later, Muhammad's friend from Oman came to visit and stayed at his house for the weekend. On the second night, the friend was traumatized and he rushed to wake Muhammad up. He told him, "I don't think I can stay here anymore." When Muhammad asked why, he said, "Since last night, I've been hearing voices of old men telling me to leave the house, and I keep dreaming of people torturing me inside your home. They want me gone." "Who's they?" Muhammad asked. "The jinns at your house," his friend yelled. This wasn't a one-time incident. It happened again and again. Every time a guest spent the night at Muhammad's house, they felt unwelcome by a dark presence and always heard voices commanding them to leave. About 2 years later, Muhammad and a group of neighborhood friends were hanging out. One of them asked Muhammad, "Who's that old woman that sits outside your house every night?" Muhammad was confused. "What are you talking about? What old woman?" Soon after, more friends began asking the same thing about the old woman. He thought they were playing some prank on him, until the adults in the area started asking his mother about the old lady too. Apparently, there was always an old woman sitting outside Muhammad's home, but whenever he or his family waited outside to see her, she never appeared. This went on for 3 to 4 years. Eventually, obviously, the family figured it out. Their house was protected by jinns. That's why the family never saw them, but outsiders did. A couple of years later, in the early 2000s, Muhammad was driving alone to his friend's house for a weekend gathering, and he got into a severe car accident. His car was destroyed, but he walked away without a single injury. When police arrived and examined the wreck, they were shocked he survived. But what confused them even more was this. The damage on the passenger's side clearly showed someone else had been with him in the car. There was a head-shaped impact on the passenger side window, yet Muhammad swore he was alone. One of the detectives said, "Muhammad, we've been doing this for years. Where's the person that was with you in the car?" Muhammad responded, "Wallah al-Azim, I was by myself, man. No one was with me." The police never believed him. They thought he was covering something up. For nearly 2 years, Muhammad was interrogated off and on about the missing passenger, but there was no one else. Eventually, they dropped the case. About a year later, after a rough day, Muhammad noticed a black cat wandering around his home. The same cat he'd seen many times before. He was frustrated. He took off a slipper and threw it at the cat. The slipper hit the cat. The cat got hurt and ran away. After that, Muhammad goes to bed. The next day, an old woman appeared at his door. It was after the Maghrib prayer. For non-Muslims, the Maghrib prayer is around 6 or 7 p.m. No one in the family had ever seen this woman before. When he stepped outside, she looked at him and said, "We protect you. We protect your family. We don't allow strangers to sleep beside you. We protected you during the car accident. We've stayed by your gate for many years. We've always protected you. But last night, you threw your slipper and injured one of ours. Do not ever hurt who protects you." She turned around and walked away. It was the same old lady seen outside his house for many years. The same group of jinns that were supposedly protecting Muhammad and his family. From that day on, Muhammad was tormented every single night he tried to sleep in his own home.
Should we show him the older homestead?
Yeah, let's go. As you know.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Was that you?
Yeah, that's on either side.
They went to both.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is considered paranormal, but I had a weird dream when I was dog sitting at my father's house. I got tired and I fell asleep in his room in the basement. In the dream, a random magician approached me and said, "Want to see a magic trick?" Before I said anything back, I woke up to all of the lights in the house flickering. The adrenaline rush I had was crazy. I used to hear footsteps when I was home alone and something scratching the walls. I was in bed and I was falling asleep. I felt like someone was touching my hair in my head, but when I looked, it was just a shadow. So one night I was sleeping in my bed and then I saw my dad come into my room. I didn't want to get in trouble, so I pretended to be asleep. But then I heard the door close. I looked at my door and I saw my dad crawling on my floor like a demon. And I screamed so loud, I went to turn on the light and my mom came in and asked what happened. He said he was just looking for an earring for his ear because he lost it. The scary part is, why would my dad even be looking for an earring in my room? I didn't even have my ears pierced yet. When he was walking out of my room with my mom, I swear he looked back and smiled really wide and his eyes started glowing. The next day, he passed away from a heart attack. One day it was already dark and I was home alone, so I was in my room. And I started hearing things, but I thought that I was just hallucinating, so I ignored it. But then I heard footsteps, like a man's loud footsteps. I thought I was just overthinking and I ignored it. But then I heard someone walking in front of my room and the chairs moving. I thought my parents came, so I called them on the phone and they said that they would come later. And at this point I was so scared I immediately locked the door. And after some time I came out of my room and the chairs were somewhere else, but no one was there. Me and my man were on FaceTime and I could hear a noise coming from his bathroom. An electric toothbrush was stood up on top of the bathroom cupboard and was vibrating but not falling over. It was not on a stand. We got off the call and he sent me a video of him turning it off. Then I call him again and as soon as he goes into his room, it starts to go off again. So he turns it off on call with me, places it back and stands at the bathroom door. At this point, he's really creeped out and I say, "Toothbrush, go bzzz," and his face turns pale. He flips the camera and shows me the toothbrush. It's going off again. He turns it off once more and gets into bed, and then it never happened again. I also always predict things, or when I speak about something, it happens. No one ever believes us because of how often it happens, and he's convinced I'm a witch.
They found 800 tiny bodies in a septic tank, and for years, no one believed the woman who said that they were there. In 2014, a local historian named Caroline Corliss revealed that something horrifying was happening in this town in Ireland. She had been researching death records near a former Catholic institution, and she found something absolutely unthinkable. 796 little ones had died there, but there were no graves. What had happened was between the 20s and the 60s, Ireland had sent these unwed pregnant women to homes run by the church. And it's so devastating. Their babies would often be taken from them, and many died due to malnutrition, neglect, or even worse. And she had suspected that these children had been buried on the site. But then when she would bring it up, nobody would listen to her. Then they had to do an excavation on the property, and when they did, they revealed that they found hundreds of human remains in a septic tank. This is a septic tank covered. I couldn't picture it at first. And this is what it looks like when you dig it up. And many of the bodies in there were only days old. They had no names, no coffins. It was just bones dumped in the dark. And this was not a rogue accident. This was a big cover-up. And this exposed a much larger pattern of abuse and cover-ups by these institutions that were supposed to protect the most vulnerable. For decades, they had literally buried the truth. And many of these women who survived were traumatized for life. And this is not ancient history. These survivors are still alive. These families still don't have answers. And even now, people are arguing that the site should be fully excavated to see what else they might find. Like, if these were your siblings, wouldn't you want them brought out of the ground and finally named? Come over here to see me go through the diary of a victim of a serial killer.
What would happen if you followed a mimic? Now, I've always wondered this, because you hear these stories of someone hearing like their mother knocking at the door or telling them to come in the kitchen. But what would happen if you actually listened to the mimic? Here's a story that might tell you why you should not follow a mimic. There was this young man named Aiden. Now, Aiden lived with his grandfather and his two parents. Now, one day, Aiden was hanging out in his bedroom, and he's playing a game. Well, he hears his parents, pull in, and he looks out the window and sees them getting out of the car, unloading some groceries into the house. So he's like, awesome, man, we're going to have something to eat. So he goes back to his game, and then he hears his mother say, Aiden, come in the kitchen. I got some food. And he, at this time was in the middle of a battle. So he's like, hold on, Mom, I'll be there shortly. I'm in the middle of a battle. And she goes, come on, Aiden, hurry up. Come in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, he said he got a phone call, and it was from his mom. And he's like, why is she calling me when she's in the kitchen? So he picks it up, and his mom's like, hey, honey, we're at the grocery store. Do you want us to get you anything? And he goes, what do you mean you're at the grocery store? You already got groceries. You're in the kitchen. And she goes, what are you talking about? We just got to the grocery store. And he looks out the window and sees that their car is not there. And then right at this moment, he hears his mom saying, you better get in the kitchen right now or you're going to be in trouble. You better come eat. And he's like, I got to call you back, Mom. He hangs up. So he goes and he locks his door, and then he calls his mom right back and is like, look, when you get home, call me. I'll help you bring in the groceries. So about 25, 30 minutes later, his mom calls him. And she's like, honey, we're home. Come outside. And he said he was getting ready to go out of his room, but he looked out his window first, and their car wasn't there. So he's like, you know what? I don't know what to do because I don't know, who really is my mom right now. So as he's sitting in his bedroom, right, he hears his parents come home and come into the house. And all of a sudden, his mom comes up to his door and starts knocking. And she goes, Aiden, let me in. And he's like, not right now, Mom. And she goes, what are you talking about? Let me in. Unlock this door. Why do you have the door locked? And he's like, no, I'm not opening the door. And his mom goes, all right, I'll just get the key and unlock it. So he grabs this baseball bat that's chilling in his room, and he's prepared for this thing to come in. And at the time, he still thinks whatever, was calling his name in the kitchen, this is them. So he sees the handle jiggle and the door open, and it's really his mom. And he can tell that it is actually his real mom. And she goes, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, nothing. And he sets the bat down. And she's like, you're acting weird and stuff. And there's food in the fridge if you're hungry. So he didn't know what to make of that. What did he just experience? And he didn't feel like he could tell his parents about it. So he decided to talk to his grandpa, who was kind of his best friend at the time. So he goes to his grandpa's room, and he's like, Grandpa, he's like, have you ever seen something you can't explain? And he goes, what do you mean? And he tells the story about how he thought his mom and dad had came home, he seen their car and everything, but it wasn't actually them. And the grandpa goes, oh no. And he goes, what's wrong, Grandpa? And he says, well, when I was a young boy, I grew up in a small Polish village near Warsaw. And he said, we had this term that was this long Polish word, but it roughly translated into evil twin. And he said they believed there were these evil spirits that could take the form of anyone and would try and trick you and lure you, out into the woods. So his grandpa said, when I was a young boy, my father had me chopping wood outside. And I hear my grandma's voice coming from the forest. And she's saying, come in the woods. I baked you a pie. Come out here. It's nice and warm. You'll like this pie. And he said, he was so hungry, he almost started to go out into the woods until his father ran and grabbed him and said, get back in the house. And his father locked the door and said, if you hear someone calling you from the woods, don't ever go. Don't respond. So he said, when you encounter an evil twin, as they called it, they will follow you for the rest of your life. And he feared that maybe this thing had followed him here to America. And this is what Aiden had seen. A couple weeks later, his parents are gone, and it's just him and his grandpa. And they're watching this World War II documentary in the living room. Well, all of a sudden, the wind picked up, and a strong breeze pushes the back kitchen door open, and they hear it, open up. So his grandpa's like, I'll go and close the door real quick, and I better lock it so it doesn't blow open again. So his grandpa goes into the kitchen, but after about 10, 15 minutes, he doesn't come back. So Aiden's like, Grandpa? Grandpa, are you all right? He goes into the kitchen. The back door's still open. And he doesn't see his grandpa. He goes throughout the house. He's yelling his name. He doesn't see him anywhere. So he goes out, to the back door and he's yelling his grandpa's name. He doesn't hear it. So he calls up his parents, and his parents come home immediately, and they call the police, and they do this big search throughout the neighborhood and into the woods. And they end up finding his grandfather in the middle of the woods. He is completely naked. He is confused and doesn't know who he is, doesn't know anything, doesn't remember anything. So they bring him back home and everything. Well, Aiden said that, they chalked this up to dementia and said he was diagnosed with a severe case of dementia. But Aiden, in his mind, suspected, because of the series of events that happened before this and his grandfather going out to the kitchen when the door opened, that this was the evil twin thing that his grandfather had talked about. And he said, although his grandfather had completely lost his memory, from time to time, he would say to Aiden, "Is my brother outside? Is my brother out there?" And he couldn't figure out why, his grandfather would keep saying that. And then he realized maybe this thing appeared as his brother, and it lured him, into the woods.
What the fuck was that? Bro!
What's going on around you?
I don't know. I'm frozen. I am frozen.
Did the window break?
Want to get creeped out? Let's talk about someone else who tried the Three Kings challenge. For storytelling purposes, we will name the person who told the story Janie. Janie was never really a fan of the occult or into anything supernatural. It was her sister Amanda who was a lot more into the occult and reading spooky stories and watching scary movies. It was Amanda who read about the Three Kings challenge and convinced her sister Janie to do the ritual, to do the challenge. Janie was more of the mindset that nothing's gonna happen anyways, so this will just be something fun, and maybe I can either spook out my sister or prove to her that this isn't really a thing. Janie and Amanda rented an old house together that had an unfinished basement that no one spent any time in, so they figured it would be the perfect place to do the ritual. It was completely unfinished, like I said, so parts of the basement were stone, and then the other part was a dirt wall. It had one small window, which they covered up. So Janie and Amanda set everything up, hung out a little bit before going to bed, and at 11 p.m., Janie went to sleep. Janie was the type of person who would toss and turn in her bed, worrying about work, worrying about what the next day would bring. But she said that night she fell asleep so quickly, by the time her alarm clock went off, she was confused, feeling like she'd only been asleep for minutes. She grabbed her cell phone, her candle, her lighter, and her power object, which was a necklace that her and her sister both shared. And it was very important to them. When Janie came out of her bedroom, her sister Amanda was waiting in the kitchen by the door to the basement, standing there wide-eyed and looking excited. Janie was extremely tired, felt like she had barely gotten any sleep, but was still just ready to do this and prove to her sister that nothing was going to happen. The sisters kept all of the lights off, and Janie quietly went down the stairs with her candle lit. A kind of nervousness came over her that she wasn't expecting to feel. Her sister closed the door behind her, and she walked down the stairs slowly, and she said that the sound of them creaking just felt so eerie, and she wasn't one to normally get spooked. She sat in the middle chair in her throne and made sure not to look at the mirrors. When Janie sat down in the middle chair in her throne, she noticed that she was sweating a little bit and kind of clammy because the fan was hitting the back of her neck and she could just feel that it was sweaty. In the first few moments that Janie sat there, she actually started to feel a lot calmer because she was like, what am I thinking? Nothing's gonna happen. I'm just gonna sit here and everything is gonna be fine. This is gonna be over before I know it. But after a few minutes, she started to get this really strange feeling, like the darkness in this basement was never ending, like she was just in another world almost. She felt like there was no upstairs. She felt like there were no streets surrounding their house. She felt like she was just in this void of black, in this void of darkness, completely alone. Then she described that suddenly it was like the air changed. It felt like there was less oxygen. That's the only way she could describe it. Like the air was stale. And she started to get this gnawing feeling like something was behind her watching her. If you've ever been running up the stairs in the dark and scared that something's about to grab you, or you get out of your bed at night to get a glass of water or go to the washroom and you feel like a hand's about to grab you from under your bed, that's how she felt. She felt like something was about to grab her from behind. The air from the fan was still hitting the back of her neck, but it was at that moment that suddenly she could no longer feel the fan, but she could still hear the fan. So she thought to herself, there is something directly behind me right now. She couldn't stop thinking about the mirrors, which she could see a little bit in her peripheral. She felt like she could almost see something standing behind her. She was concentrating very hard on not looking at the mirrors and thinking, what did I get myself into? With part 2.
Welcome to episode 2 of the me reading scary stories to tell in the dark. We're gonna read Scarecrow. Let's begin. There was an old farmer in Arizona who owned the best farm in the area. Everybody said his crops were the best, and people came from all over to buy their goods from him. Whenever people asked him how he was able to grow such good quality crops, the old farmer would say it was all down to a scarecrow. "That old scarecrow is the one I have to thank," said the farmer. "He makes sure no crows or critters or pests come near my crops." The old farmer had built the scarecrow himself, and it was a fearsome sight. He spent months working on it to make it as scary as possible. He knew how important it was to keep pests away from his crops, so he gave it enormous straw arms that stretched out about 6 feet and big long legs that made it as tall as a tree. But the scariest thing about this scarecrow was its head. The farmer carved it himself out of a huge pumpkin. He spent countless days and nights perfecting his design until it was perfect. The scarecrow's face and head was so grotesque and ugly that even he sometimes was scared to look at it. But it was very effective, scaring away every rodent and bird that ventured near. The neighboring farm was owned by 2 young men who were brothers named Josh and Harold. They were lazy and never did much work around the farm, which resulted in their crops being bad. They were jealous of the old farmer's success and were plotting against him. If they could drive him out of business, they could take over his farm and make more money. So one night, the brothers decided to sneak onto the old farmer's land. They stole his prized scarecrow and brought it back to their own house, where they stuffed it into an old closet so nobody would ever find it. The next day, the farmer woke up to find his hideous scarecrow missing, and all his crops were eaten by rats and crows. He fell to his knees and cried, knowing that his farm would soon be out of business. Meanwhile, the brothers Josh and Harold were watching from their own property and couldn't help but laugh out loud when they saw the old man's tears of grief. Hearing the laughter, the old farmer came over and asked them if they knew what happened to his scarecrow. The brothers looked him right in the eye and said they had no idea where his precious scarecrow might be. "But you know I'll go out of business and I'll have to sell my farm if I can't find my scarecrow," said the farmer. Josh just laughed in his face, saying, "That's just your tough luck, isn't it?" "Sucks to be you," giggled Harold. The old farmer walked away back to his house, his head hanging down in defeat and depression. That night, Josh and Harold had trouble sleeping, not because they felt any remorse, but because they couldn't get the image of the scarecrow's horrible twisted face out of their minds. They decided they would never be able to sleep as long as that ugly pumpkin head was in their house, so they got up and dragged the scarecrow out of the closet. Harold took a baseball bat and smashed the scarecrow's head to pieces until all that was left was little bits of pumpkin strewn all around the floor. The brothers swept up the pumpkin head pieces and threw them in the trash. Then they went back to bed and were soon fast asleep, having put all thoughts of the disgusting scarecrow face out of their heads. Sometime after midnight, Josh and Harold were awoken by the sounds of scratching and clawing at their bedroom door. "Did you forget to put the dog out?" asked Harold sleepily. We don't have a dog," stammered Josh. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open, and a solitary long straw arm snaked in through the opening. Then a second arm thrashed around, followed by 2 long stick legs. The 2 brothers were frozen in fear and could only look with horror as the headless scarecrow's body rose up on its long stick legs, and its long arms reached out for them in the darkness. Harold felt a cold, sinewy straw claw close around his ankle and screamed as loud as he could. He begged his brother Josh to help him, but Josh
Josh was already running out of the bedroom, fleeing in terror. He ran down the hallway, crashed through the front door, and out onto the moonlit road. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, puffing and panting and screaming at the top of his voice. As he passed his neighbor's house, he saw the old farmer standing at his gate. In the moonlight, he could see the farmer just staring at him with a strange smile on his face. Josh kept running, his bare feet slapping against the rough gravel road. He glanced back over his shoulder and saw something that scared him to his very soul. He saw the scarecrow running along the road, but close beside him. It was gaining on him, coming closer and closer, right behind him. And that wasn't all he saw. He noticed that the scarecrow had a brand new head, and it looked a lot like Harold. The end. I hope you liked that story and this series. I will continue to keep reading them. Stay spooky. Bye.